And so, if you can see, what I'm going to do, it's also very soft. So I'm going to take this little micro spatula and I'm going to hold it right here. Zoom in on that for a second. So it's a very reactive metal, but it's coated in oil, so it's not munching on my fingertips too bad yet. I'm going to slice off a chunk to expose a fresh surface. When I do, you see how nice and shiny that is? Very metallic luster, right? And then I'm going to put the rest of that back in the oil, and I'm going to put the lid back on, and then I'm going to zoom back out here, and I'm going to take that little speck of sodium metal, and I'm going to pop it in the water. Now what's happening is this sodium metal is giving away its electrons. It's giving its electrons away to the hydrogen bound to the oxygen in the water. And the net result was we ended up with a compound, or a salt called sodium hydroxide, and the hydrogen then was free to leave. It made hydrogen gas. That was the fizzing. Now, sodium is found right above potassium. Potassium is further down on the periodic table. It's its bigger brother, and we all know things about big brothers. I'm a little worried about holding this over the water. So that happened, that had the sodium hydroxide happen in it. I'm going to show you this. And it looks kind of grotesque because it's oxidized on the surface, much like iron gets rust on the surface when exposed to air. So this had a little exposure to air. But again, we're going to cut a chunk of it off. It's also quite soft, and you can see the metallic luster of that piece that I cut. Put the rest of it back in the jar. So that little speck of potassium, we're going to see how it reacts with water. So I'll bring the water back here. And did we see that? Yeah, we might have to do it again. Yeah, so there are stories that I'm not going to tell you, but let's just say, I will tell you a story. Potassium, what's its chemical symbol?
K.
K. What would somebody might possibly confuse that potassium with? What other elements on the periodic table? There's another element that starts with a P.
Phosphorus.
Yeah, phosphorus. And its elemental symbol is P, which is not the same as K. And it turns out, when I was going to Mankato, somebody in the stockroom had mislabeled potassium P. Now, potassium, phosphorus, white phosphorus, has to be stored underwater or it bursts into flame. Guess what happens when you store potassium underwater? We'll recount here. There was a jar, and the stockroom personnel saw that this jar labeled P was dry. Well, that's a problem, because it's filled with this white crusty stuff in there that could explode and blow up at any minute exposed to oxygen. So they opened up the jar and filled it up with water, which is what you would do to make sure that oxygen doesn't get to white phosphorus. Except it was potassium. Put the lid on it, set it on the counter, all of a sudden heard and just at that time, some wheels went spinning. And they were like, oh, I was running a lab 2 floors down, okay, because I was TAing. And I hear this. Made the explosion in here sound like a pop gun. I went running up there, and the stockroom helper was laid out on the floor. Luckily, he hit the floor before the explosion. The whole stockroom had little purple fires everywhere from the molten potassium that exploded out of the jar. The rest of the day we spent with water bottles looking at any specks of anything and going like this, and it'd go yeah. Luckily nobody was hurt or killed. Could have happened.
Did you find out who did it?
No. It was an old label, so probably years old. All right. So yeah,